the rise of Osiris, and the birth of Afterlife. Beliefs: long before Osiris ruled the underworld, he was remembered as the gentle king who brought order, agriculture, and justice to the early world. In the era when humans were still learning how to live in harmony with the land, Osiris taught them the rhythms of the Nile, the meaning of cooperation, and the importance of Ma'at, the divine balance that held the universe together. His reign marked a golden age, a time when people believed the earth and heaven were closer than ever. Osiris's connection to the cycles of nature made him more than a king. He became the embodiment of renewal. When the Nile flooded, Egyptians saw Osiris in the rising waters. When crops sprouted, they felt his presence in the green fields. And when the harvest returned each year, they believed Osiris had kept his promise to sustain humanity. But behind this prosperity lay a deeper transformation. The people who honored Osiris began to understand something profound. Death was not an end, but a passage. If life renewed every season, then perhaps the soul did too. This became the seed of Egypt's most influential belief: the concept of an afterlife, structured, ordered, and governed by Osiris himself. When Osiris was murdered by Set and later resurrected by Isis, Egyptians viewed this not merely as a myth, but as a revelation. They believed Osiris had experienced death, conquered it, and returned with knowledge of what lay beyond. No other deity carried such authority. Ra ruled the sun, but Osiris ruled the destiny of souls. Thus began the evolution of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, a vast landscape where the dead journeyed, guided by Osiris's laws. Unlike chaotic mythological underworlds in other cultures, the Duat was not a place of torment. It was a realm of trials, truth, and judgment. And at its throne sat Osiris, silent, calm, eternal. Not as a king of the living, but as the lord of the dead, whose judgment shaped the fate of every soul. This belief reshaped Egyptian life. Tombs became sacred passageways. Rituals were refined into precise ceremonies. Spells were written, carved, and recited to protect the soul. The living prepared carefully for death, knowing that Osiris awaited them not as a punisher, but as a fair and perfect judge. Osiris's transformation from ruler of the earth to ruler of the afterlife marked the beginning of humanity's oldest and most elaborate vision of what lies beyond life, a vision that would continue evolving for thousands of years. The structure of Duat and the journey of the soul. To the ancient Egyptians, death was not darkness or oblivion. It was a journey, a long passage through the hidden world beneath the earth. Duat, unlike chaotic or terrifying underworlds found in other mythologies. The Duat was a structured realm, organized with the same precision that governed the heavens, the Nile, and the stars. It was a kingdom with rules, guardians, pathways, and cosmic laws, all shaped by Osiris and the divine concept of Ma'at. The Duat was often described as a vast landscape made of corridors, caverns, rivers, fields, deserts, and shimmering gateways. It was not one place, but many. Maps of the Duat, inscribed inside coffins, tomb walls, and papyri, show an elaborate, interconnected world. Each region had its own trials, spirits, deities, and dangers waiting for the newly dead. The soul entered Duat through the western horizon, the symbolic place where Ra disappeared each evening. This made the sunset sacred. Egyptians believed that when someone died, they followed the same path the sun took every night. Just as Ra traveled through danger to be reborn at dawn, the soul traveled through Duat, seeking rebirth in the afterlife. The journey was long. It was said to last through 12 regions, mirroring the 12 hours of the night. Each region had passageways guarded by demons or ancient spirits. These beings were not evil. They were gatekeepers, enforcers of cosmic order. Only those who spoke the correct spells, carried the correct amulets, or had lived with purity could pass safely. The soul was accompanied by its spiritual parts, Ka, the life force, Ba, the personality, and Ak, the enlightened form. These aspects sometimes acted independently, sometimes together. They needed nourishment, guidance, protection, and knowledge to survive the journey. That is why families placed food, amulets, and sacred writings inside tombs. Every item had a purpose for the path through Duat. Some regions of the Duat were serene, fields of reeds where spirits glided across calm waters, or halls where the stars themselves shone upon the dead. Other regions were less welcoming, caverns filled with serpents, abysses patrolled by giant guardians, lakes of fire that purified or destroyed depending on the soul's truthfulness. To help the dead navigate these places, Egyptians created powerful texts known today as the Book of the Dead, Book of Gates, and Book of the Amduat. These were not simply prayers. They were instruction manuals, describing exactly how to address each guardian, how to move through each gate, and how to protect oneself from danger. Every spell had a purpose: to open a door, to silence a demon, to grant strength, or to guide the soul toward Osiris. Yet the journey was not merely about survival, it was a journey toward judgment. As the soul progressed deeper into Duat, it approached the most important moment of its existence, the Hall of Ma'at, where truth was measured and fate was decided. For the Egyptians, this was the ultimate test, one that even kings could not escape, one that wealth or power could not influence. In Duat, all souls walked the same path, spoke the same words, and faced the same truth. And at the end of that path sat Osiris, waiting in silence for the final weighing of the heart. After navigating the twisting paths and sacred gates of Duat, the soul finally reached the most important chamber in the underworld, the place where eternity would be decided. This was the Hall of Ma'at, a vast and shimmering court that radiated divine order. Columns shaped like feathers rose into darkness, the symbol of truth repeating endlessly across the architecture. Every stone here seemed to whisper a single idea: nothing false can survive in this place. The soul entered the hall trembling, for even the purest heart felt the weight of what was about to happen. No one, not even a pharaoh, could avoid judgment. Here, all ranks were equal. All souls stood alone before the truth. At the center of the chamber stood Anubis, the jackal-headed god of mummification and protector of the dead calm. Silent and impartial, he guided the soul to the great scales of judgment. Unlike earthly justice, these scales were not symbolic. They literally determined the fate of the deceased. On one side of the scale lay the soul's heart. On the other side lay the feather of Ma'at, representing absolute truth, balance, and cosmic order. The Egyptians believed the heart recorded every action, thought, and intention of a person's life. It could not be bribed, altered, or persuaded. It remembered everything. As the scales balanced, the hall fell silent. Around the chamber sat the 42 judges of Ma'at, each representing a moral principle: honesty, compassion, purity, loyalty, humility, and more. The soul had to proclaim its innocence before them, one by one, reciting the famous negative confessions: I have not stolen. I have not lied. I have not caused pain. I have not profaned the gods. I have not taken what is not mine. I have not darkened the heart of another. These were not claims of perfection. They were ideals the soul aspired to live by, Every confession was a spiritual echo of a life lived in harmony with Ma'at. Standing beside Anubis was Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing. As the scales shifted, Thoth recorded everything with precise, unerring calm. His judgment was final. No god, not even Osiris, could overturn his writing. If the heart was heavier than the feather, weighted down by lies, cruelty, or injustice, the consequences were immediate. From the shadows approached Ammit, the devourer, a monstrous being with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus, the three most feared animals in Egypt. She did not torment or punish. She simply consumed the heart, erasing the person's existence entirely. No afterlife, no return, no memories, a second death, final and absolute. But if the heart balanced perfectly with the feather, light as truth itself, a radiant path opened in the hall. Music echoed softly. The judges nodded in approval, and Anubis stepped aside, revealing a throne made of obsidian and emerald. There sat Osiris, the lord of the underworld. Silent yet compassionate behind him grew the eternal fields of the blessed. Aaru, the field of reeds, where the righteous lived in peace, working fertile lands under a sun that never burned and a sky that never darkened. This was paradise, not of luxury, but of harmony, a perfect reflection of life as it should have been. For the Egyptians, this moment defined the purpose of living: to speak truth, to live justly, to act with balance, to uphold Ma'at in every decision. Only then could one stand before Osiris with a heart free of burden and continue the journey into eternity. Osiris as judge, king, and the structure of the afterlife. Once the heart was weighed and truth revealed, the soul stood before Osiris, the eternal king who ruled the underworld with a calm and silent majesty. Unlike earthly rulers, Osiris did not reign through power, fear, or dominance. His authority came from wisdom, experience, and the ultimate sacrifice. He was the only god who had died and returned, making him uniquely qualified to govern those who crossed that same threshold. Seated on a throne of black stone and glowing emerald, Osiris radiated a quiet strength. His green skin represented rebirth, his white crown symbolized sovereignty, and the crook and flail in his hands reflected both guidance and discipline. Behind him stood Isis and Nephthys, guardians, sisters, and divine protectors, while Anubis watched the hall from the shadows, ensuring order and justice. In Osiris's realm, the afterlife was not a single uniform paradise. It was an entire kingdom, structured much like Egypt itself, with fertile lands, flowing waterways, border regions, and distant, mysterious territories. Souls did not wander aimlessly. They lived with purpose. For the righteous, the destination was Aaru, the field of reeds. Here, the world existed in its perfect form. An idealized Egypt where crops grew effortlessly, where water was cool and abundant, and where the land stretched endlessly under gentle sunlight. The blessed dead cultivated fields, sailed on sacred waterways, hunted, celebrated, and lived in harmony. Life in Aaru was not idleness. It was meaningful work, forever balanced, forever peaceful. But beneath this serene paradise lay the responsibility of maintaining Ma'at. Even in the afterlife, order required attention. Souls performed tasks not as punishment, but as participation in the eternal flow of creation. Some worked alongside Osiris's divine retinue. Others guarded the borders of Duat or helped guide newly arrived spirits. The afterlife was a continuation, not an escape, from the purpose of living. Yet not all regions of Osiris's kingdom were peaceful. Beyond Aaru lay desolate deserts, shadowed valleys, and guarded passages where the wicked wandered. These were not eternal torture chambers. Egypt did not conceive of hell as a place of endless suffering. Instead, these regions were states of imbalance, where the soul struggled with the consequences of its own actions. Many of these souls eventually faded, unable to sustain themselves without Mayat. Others found guidance through rituals performed by the living, whose prayers and offerings strengthened the Ka of the deceased. This interconnectedness between the living and the dead defined Osiris's rule. Families offered food, water, incense, and prayers. In return, ancestors watched over the family line, providing protection and counsel. It was a reciprocal relationship, two worlds held together by memory, devotion, and ritual. Osiris's court also served as a cosmic archive. Thoth recorded every judgment, ensuring that truth was preserved. Divine scribes maintained scrolls of the living and dead. Spirits of justice monitored the flow of righteousness across both worlds. The underworld was not chaos. It was a perfectly maintained system, balanced through cooperation between divine beings. The living and the deceased Osiris himself rarely spoke. But when he did, it was said his voice echoed across both realms. He ruled with an empathy born only from experience. He understood pain, betrayal, death, and renewal. He was not simply a judge. He was a guide, a guardian, and a symbol of the hope that life continues beyond the final breath. Under his reign, death was not feared. It was understood. It was prepared for. It was transformed into a journey toward truth and eternity. The most famous of these guides was the Book of the Dead, though the Egyptians called it the Book of Coming Forth by Day. It was not a single book, but a customizable collection of spells chosen to fit the needs of each individual. Wealthy nobles commissioned beautifully illustrated scrolls filled with instructions on how to address gatekeepers, how to avoid traps, how to transform into protective deities, and how to ensure the heart remained light in the Hall of Mayat. Even ordinary people could obtain simpler versions, written on mummy wrappings or small pieces of papyrus. Other sacred texts also guided the soul: the Book of Gates, describing each hour of the night; the Book of the Duat, mapping Ra's journey through Duat; and the coffin texts, inscribed inside wooden coffins so the dead were surrounded by knowledge. But spells alone were not enough. Egyptians believed that physical objects carried magical power, especially amulets. These included the Ankh for life, the scarab for rebirth, the Jed pillar for stability, and the heart scarab, placed over the chest to prevent the heart from speaking against the soul during judgment. Each amulet was consecrated by priests, who recited formulas to activate its protective energy. The process of mummification was itself a ritual of magic and transformation. Priests performed dozens of ceremonies while preparing the body: purification, anointing with oils, wrapping with spells, and the iconic opening of the mouth ceremony, which restored the senses of the deceased so they could eat, speak, and breathe in the afterlife. Every gesture was precise. Every word had power. The body had to be preserved, for the soul needed a physical anchor to return to during its eternal journey. Even the tomb played a crucial role. Walls were decorated with scenes of offerings, journeys, and gods, turning the tomb into a microcosm of the afterlife. Food, tools, clothing, and miniature servants called ushabti were placed inside, so the dead would have everything they needed. Families visited these tombs regularly, bringing offerings that nourished the Ka and strengthened the spirit. Through all of these rituals, the Egyptians believed they were equipping the dead not just to survive, but to thrive. Death was not abandonment. It was a responsibility. The living protected the deceased, and the deceased, once settled in the afterlife, protected the living in return. To the Egyptians, magic, Heka, was not superstition, and with its help, every soul had a chance to reach Osiris and step into eternity. The Egyptian meaning of death, transformation, and eternal life. To the people of ancient Egypt, death was not a failure of the body, nor a punishment from the gods. It was a necessary transformation, a passage into a new state of existence, governed not by fear, but by order, memory, and cosmic harmony. They believed life was only the first chapter of a much longer story, and that true existence began after the final breath. In this worldview, death was a doorway, not a disappearance. The body might fall silent, but the soul, the Ka, Ba, and Ak, continued onward, carrying the essence of the person into the next realm. What awaited them was not chaos or eternal torment, but a structured journey shaped by the wisdom of Osiris, the king who had walked the path before all others. For Egyptians, the most sacred truth was that the soul could be reborn, just as the sun rose each morning and the Nile renewed its banks each year. This cycle of death and renewal was woven into every part of society. Farmers saw it in their fields, priests in their rituals, and families in the passing of generations. Life was temporary, but the pattern of existence was eternal. To live well meant to prepare for the moment when one joined that eternal pattern. Because of this belief, Egyptians approached death with a profound sense of responsibility. The rituals surrounding burial were not meant to glorify the wealthy or display power. They were acts of protection. The body had to be preserved so the soul could recognize itself. The tomb had to be built as a sacred home. Offerings had to be given so that the Ka would not fade from hunger. Through these actions, the living ensured the dead would not wander lost, but would find their rightful place in the court of Osiris. Yet death was more than preparation. It was also an unveiling of truth. In the hall of Ma'at, the heart revealed every hidden intention, every unspoken action. Egyptians believed that life was a test not of achievements, but of character. A person who lived with balance, compassion, honesty, and respect for the divine order carried a light heart. A person who brought harm, dishonesty, or disruption to the world carried a heavy one. Death did not change this truth, it clarified it. Those who passed the weighing of the heart entered Aaru, the field of reeds, a perfected version of life where harmony reigned and work was joyful rather than burdensome. Here, families reunited. Here, the soul experienced peace without stagnation, purpose without suffering. And above all, the righteous lived in the presence of Osiris, sharing in the stability and renewal he embodied. For those who failed, oblivion awaited, not punishment, but erasure. To the Egyptians, this was the ultimate tragedy. Not pain, but the loss of memory, identity, and place within the cosmic order. To be forgotten was to cease to exist. Yet even this fear was softened by their belief in Heka, the magical force that sustained creation through rituals, prayers, amulets, and offerings. The living helped the dead maintain strength and identity. In return, the dead guided and protected the living. Life and afterlife were not separate. They were interconnected worlds, sustained by mutual devotion. In the end, the Egyptian understanding of death was profoundly hopeful. It taught that existence does not end with mortality, that the soul continues, that truth matters, that balance is worth striving for, and that behind the veil of death waits a king who understands suffering, renewal, and mercy. Osiris offered not immortality for the chosen few, but eternity for all who lived in harmony with Ma'at. Through him, death became not an ending, but a return, a transformation, and a continuation of the endless cycle that bound gods, humans, and the cosmos together.